Board of Supervisors to order, please. We will start with the Pledge of Allegiance. Please remain standing. Following the Pledge of Allegiance will be a silent moment of reflection. I
pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. We'll have the reading of the notice, please.
An educational meeting of the Marathon County Board of Supervisors will be held at the Marathon County Courthouse Assembly Room, 500 Forest Street, City of Wausau at 7 p.m. on January 19th, 2023, and the agenda was duly signed and posted.
Thank you. And I would like to request everyone please silence your cell phones or put them on vibrate and any other electronic devices as to not be an interruption to the meeting. And also all of our guests, if they would do the same, I appreciate that. And we'll go to roll call, and I'd ask everyone please sign in. Oh, jeez.
And I was on the site.
Supervisor Opal, have you tried to log in to?
Rebooting, it might take a while.
Yeah.
I'm present.
Appreciate it, we'll mark you present, thank you so very much. Okay, we'll proceed, and I would like to welcome all of the visitors that we have with us this evening, and also the viewing audience. So thank you for your interest in Marathon County. We'll move on to item 7 on the agenda, and that is the public comment, 15 minutes. I have had no one approach me to address the board, and the clerk has said the same, so there is no public comment. And then we will move on to education presentation and/or reports. And item 8A is standing committee chairpersons or designees. Any reports by standing committee chairs or designees? Okay, we will move on to review and discuss Tuesday's meeting agenda items, and we'll start with under 9A appointments. Under 9A1, the 2023 emergency fire wardens.
For the town of Bevent, Jeff Rashka in Hatley. Town of Hamburg, Jerry and Jody Block in Athens. Town of Mosinee, Jeff Kios in Mosinee. And for the town of Rib Mountain, the Safer Fire Department Chief Joseph Fink in Wausau.
Okay, I've got Supervisor Covelli. You wish to speak?
Yes.
Please
Thank
go
you.
ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I do know that Jeff Rashka no longer is involved with Eagle Lodge Mercantile. And I did speak to him and Dwayne Rozek, who was the prior owner and still owns the building. And I think Dwayne was interested in resuming the fire warden position.
So these appointments are coming from the DNR, the Department of Natural Resources, and so we're approving what they are sending us for requests. So I think in order to deviate from that, I think we would have to have the request come from the DNR to be a change. So I would, if you would, have that discussion with the individual that has an interest, and then direct their questions to the DNR.
Okay, will do. I did contact them and have them reach out to them, so
Okay.
I noticed it wasn't updated, so
Yeah.
thank you.
Because we haven't received any update from the DNR. That's the current information that we've received. Okay, any other questions on the 2023 emergency fire wardens appointments? Okay, we'll move on to item 9A2, WVLS Board.
Appointing Catherine Palmer of Cronenwetter to the Wisconsin Valley Library Service Board of Trustees to complete a 3-year term to expire December 31st, 2023, replacing Mandy Wright.
Any discussion? Okay, we will move on to item 9A3, Library Board.
Appointing Supervisor Becky Book, Leanne Podruck of Lakefront Drive, Hatley, for 3-year terms to expire December 31st, 2025. And then also appointing Brent Jacobson, Fairway Drive, Mosinee, to complete a 3-year term to expire December 31st, 2023, replacing Jeff Campo.
Discussion. Any discussion? Any questions? Vice Chair McEwen, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. The 3 individuals that are being brought forward for the library board, myself and the chair had an opportunity to review 15 applicants at that time. We did receive them on Tuesday. Then Friday, we met with the administrator, went through every one of the applicants, and prior to that, I did have 4 individuals out of those that I thought would be good to be serving on this board. Of course, Becky Book and Brent Jacobson were 2 of them. The other 2 were a doctor from Wausau Hospital, and then Leanne, is it Podruck? I pronounced her name wrong. And the reason I picked those 2, beginning with Leanne, was she's from Hatley. She represents basically the Hatley branch. She uses it. Brent Jacobson uses the Mosinee branch. And I just felt that there would be a little variety of people on that board, not everybody from the city of Wausau. Nothing that's wrong with the city of Wausau, but they have majority of the people that serve on these, on the library board and other boards are from Wausau just because of their size. So I haven't found anything that I didn't like about any of these 3 individuals. Of course, we know Becky, and most of us know Brent Jacobson, that were here prior to the expiring of last term. So I would encourage everybody, unless they have other information, that they would support these 3 individuals for the library board, because I do think they represent this board, which has changed, quite significantly since last year. So, thank you.
And just to expand upon that, I think the Vice Chair did a perfect job, but we have 1 individual on the board that represents the Athens area, so that branch and that part of the county is represented. Now we have someone from the Mosinee area that represents the southern part of the county, and then we have somebody on the eastern part of the county. So I too would encourage, after looking through all of the candidates, and the administrator did send out an email to everyone explaining the process which he used, and interviewed the applicants that had submitted their request to be considered. And I'm, as the Vice Chair said, in compliance or in agreeance with supporting these individuals for the library board. So, any other discussion? Okay, we will move on to the local emergency planning committee.
Appointing Supervisor Stacy Morash to the Local Emergency Planning Committee for a term to expire in April 2024 at the end of the current county board term.
Any discussion? Okay, we will then move on to ordinances. Under 9B1, the Town of Wayne rezone, Aaron Carlin and Tim and Tracy Carlin. Ordinance 0-1-23. Okay, we will move on to item 9B2, Town of Knowlton rezone, Tim Vreeland on behalf of Margaret Fuentes. Ordinance 0-2-23. Any questions? Okay, we will move on to item 9B3, the Town of Knowlton rezone, Richard Kirsten and Christy Wick. Ordinance 0-3-23. Any questions? Moving on to resolutions from the Environmental Resources Committee. Item 9C, 1A, Town of Weston rezone, Resolution 2-23. Any discussion? Okay, we will move on to item from the Human Resources, Finance and Property Committee. Item 9C, 2A, approve the 2022 budget transfers for Marathon County Department of Appropriations, Resolution 3-23. Okay, we'll move on to item 9C3, Environmental Resources Committee and Human Resources and Finance and Property Committee. Item 9C3A, approve the use of the Environmental Impact Fund fees for the use in updating the Marathon County Groundwater Plan, Resolution 4-23. And we have with us Christine Heinrich from the CPC department, going to give us an update of what the groundwater plan, what that all entails. And we also have the CPC director, and we also have individual from the Department of Health. It'll be green.
There you go. Okay, thank you. Hi, good evening, everyone. My name is Kirsty Heidenreich, and I'm joined by my colleagues Dale Grosskirth, Lori Miskimmons. I'm going to start us out with a very brief presentation, and then we'll kind of tag team it together from there. I wanted to present to you tonight a wonderful opportunity to get us one step closer to being the healthiest, the safest, and the most prosperous county in Wisconsin. So I'm going to give you a little bit of an overview on the Marathon County Groundwater Plan, letting you know where we're at with it and kind of where we would like to go from here. So this is what we know about Marathon County's groundwater. We do currently have a groundwater plan, but it has not been updated since 2001. So that data is outdated by about 22 years, and even the data and the information put together at that time is very, very skeletal data. So we really are in need of a baseline data to update the plan. More and more every day, we hear things in the news related to water quality, water quantity. We can't help but wonder on a personal level and ourselves on a professional level more about what the status of our groundwater is. And so we do have many inquiries from citizens. We do have many folks reaching out to us for help. And so what we're presenting to you tonight is kind of our solution of how we can help everyone work together to have a better idea of what we're dealing with. We are not alone. Many, many counties in Wisconsin are funding broad-scale groundwater studies. Many of the counties that are doing those studies are studies funded by the county board and in full support of the county board. So they are not anomalies. They are not situations where these counties are applying for specialized grants. It's the county coming together in unity and realizing that we need to have a better idea of the situation that we're dealing with at this point. I wanted to give you just a very few brief examples of some of the data that we do have. And one of the easiest ways to acknowledge the level of data we have is just putting it on a map and taking a look at where we see what we call kind of some data deserts, lack of data. So if you look at this map and you can see the outline of Marathon County, I don't necessarily want you to focus on the colors, but I would like you to focus on the areas that are tan or not colored. Those are the areas of our county where we do not have any data related to the levels of nitrate in our drinking water. So many portions of our county, we do not know if the private wells in those areas have safety levels that exceed the 10 milligrams per liter. And we do know that if we look at all of our neighboring counties, if you look at how many boxes are colored in, whether the data is good or bad, you can see that they have a lot more data than we do because they have made a more focused effort to try to gather that data over the years. This is one map that is most concerning to us in conservation planning and zoning because this is an area that we do work in a lot. This is a map showing atrazine in our county. Atrazine is a very common herbicide used commonly on crops like corn, soybeans, potatoes, and it's also the most common herbicide found in tap water in the United States. Marathon County does have two portions of the county that have atrazine prohibition areas where farmers are deemed to not be able to apply those herbicides at all because there have been found to be such high levels of atrazine in the drinking water. And so those areas were created in 1998. Since that time, we have not done anything further to investigate the situation, nor have homeowners in those areas been notified. And so it is very concerning. This is one of the key areas we need to dig a little deeper into and try to educate our citizens on. This is a map showing by color the risk of contaminated drinking water in Marathon County. It's interesting to me because the areas that you see in the light to dark purple, those are the areas that are most susceptible to contaminated drinking water. And sometimes we tend to put drinking water and agriculture or certain types of land uses together and think they go hand in hand. But that's not the case in this map. It shows that even though we may think of the eastern part of our county as maybe more woodsy and full of lakes and things like that, that's the area of the county that a lot of times we may be paying less attention to in this area of science, and it is the most important in this example. And then one of the last maps I wanted to show you, we've been having discussions lately in our planning efforts to communicate this message to you related to the quantity of groundwater in Marathon County. And we have heard from many of your colleagues how concerning quantity is related to our precious groundwater. So if you look at the outline of Marathon County here, you can see that all of the western part of the county has those shaded areas over it, as well as the area just to the east of the Wisconsin River. And those are areas that the Wisconsin DNR has deemed as water deficient areas. And this is because there is bedrock related to primarily granite that does not yield much groundwater in that area. So we know, for example, there's a farm that we work with, they have 20 wells that they've had to dig just to try to get adequate water. They have put requests in for more wells, and the DNR has said, no, there is no more water here, and they have polluted some of the neighboring wells as well. And the DNR has even forced them to pay for those neighbors' new wells. And that's just one situation. But in Western Marathon County, it is dire in many instances. And we've even heard of industries in the area that are buying land just because that land contains water that they can pump or connect a pipeline over to the land they want to build on. Because the land they would like to locate their business, there is no water there to do a business. So it's concerning. These are just a very few brief examples that I'm sharing with you. I wanted to let you know we have connected with the DNR on a high level. We have had conversations with the groundwater use section chief in Madison. He's willing to work with us hand in hand in diving into the groundwater quantity issues in Marathon County. The DNR does have 2 active monitoring wells, one located in the city of Wausau, one near the county forest in Cronenwetter. They're happy to share that data with us. It's public information. They're happy to connect us to partners that may also have some data available as well as we approach this. So here's the meat of the situation. This is how we're going to get there. We want to start with a baseline of sampling 1,000 private wells. This may sound like a lot, but let me just remind you that with 40 townships, that is only an average of 25 tests per township. That is a very, very minimal amount when we're considering the geographic area of Marathon County. And we're going to do that over a 2-year period of time. So we would aim for 500 samples a year, doing 2 big pushes for tests of about 250 at a time. And we would do that by setting up shop in a town hall, getting all the people bottles they need ahead of time, and then having them deliver it to the town hall. We'll drive everything to the lab. So we're making everything very accessible, very easy. We are partnering with UW Stevens Point nationally renowned lab, their water and environmental lab, WHEEL. And they're going to work with us to create targeted sampling of these wells based on the well locations. And we'll be using reasonable distribution throughout the county. We're going to look at land use. We're going to take a very scientific approach to where those wells are. The great thing about working with WHEEL is all the counties that were mentioned early on in the presentation, most of those counties are also partnering with WHEEL. So they have very educated and talented folks there that work with people like us to create an open space for community members to feel safe talking about issues and to also deal with problems as roadblocks are created perhaps along the way and need to be overcome. So we do envision meetings and workshops throughout the county. We would never just hold meetings in one central location. We would have meetings and outreach workshops in every corner of the county throughout the couple of year period we would be doing this. And we would be able to get this all accomplished with $275,000 using the environmental impact funds. So we have gone into the details of the appropriate use of those funds with both the Environmental Resource Committee and the HR Finance Committee, and they both were unanimous in moving this forward because they did also feel that this was a very appropriate use of these environmental impact funds. So right away, hoping that this is approved, hoping we have your support to move this forward, we would launch in this first quarter of this year a Marathon County Groundwater Work Group. This is already so needed here in our county. So it'd be a wonderful opportunity for collaboration. We would bring together various stakeholders, the best and the brightest people we know in groundwater, and we would strategize an outreach effort to landowners and to create a well testing study to launch this year. We have set an ambitious goal to update that 22-year-old groundwater plan by the end of next year. And we believe we can do it because we're going to work together with partners. We've already connected with the hydrogeologist that works for the Department of Ag, and he has committed to doing an atrazine study in Marathon County in 2023 and 2024. He signs up 1 or 2 counties a year, and we're already on the list for 2023. And what does that cost us? It is free. He's doing it free of charge. So we love partners like that. We're also partnering with UW Extension, and we're going to work on targeting farmsteads to make sure that there are not nitrate levels in those wells that are commonly exposed to high levels of nutrients, and that there are safe drinking water for workers out there as well. And just in closing, wanted to remind you that this is the way we meet that very important strategic plan objective 6.3, to protect and enhance the quantity and quality of potable groundwater and surface water supplies. Without a plan like this, without this type of partnership and opportunity coming into fruition, there is no way to meet this objective. We are counting on the Marathon County Board to reaffirm this objective so that it can be met by 2024, but we believe that this is a feasible way to get there together. So with that, we'll take questions if you have them.
Questions by anyone? Supervisor Opel, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. PFAS, will you be, when you're out there testing, will you be looking for more than just nitrates and stuff of that nature?
Actually, Dale Grosskreutz with the County Health Department. It's a very good question. PFAS weren't initially part of this plan. The state has done some testing, and if we were to include PFAS as a part of it, we'd have to look back at the numbers. The typical PFAS test runs about $500 each.
Now, I think the municipalities test for them because of the treatment plants, but I guess we really would have a hard time gathering any information out in the rural areas.
There have been about 11 tests that have been done. The state, DNR and DHS worked on a randomized sample across the state, 450 samples, around 11 of them in Marathon County. If we wanted to get more information about private wells, we'd have to do some more testing. But as you said, municipalities are under requirements to test for PFAS now.
And the follow-up question is, we all, I guess from what I've been hearing on the news, we all have PFAS stored in our own tissues. What are the health issues, and at what level do we know
Sure.
we may be concerned?
They've identified some common health issues, which would be like related to cholesterol level, decreased fertility among women, sometimes thyroid issues. There are others that they've associated. Currently, the Department of Health Services has a drinking water standard of 20 parts per trillion. I don't have it off the top of my head what your blood lead level, PFAS blood level would need to be in order to be of concern. There's still, it's one of the newer fields of study, and they're still trying to determine some of the information that's associated with it. Many of the studies are done around people who've been through industry exposed or based on animal studies and trying to extrapolate it to humans.
Supervisor Crivelli, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you for the presentation. I've seen studies on herbicides and things that farmers use for, growing crops and keeping weeds down and being able to supply food to the population. What's the long-term goal of this study to help at least the groundwater situation, with pollutants versus growing crops and things like that?
Yeah, that is a great question. So I'll just, start out by saying we don't know what we don't know, right? So there could be a chance that we have no herbicides in the groundwater when we do testing. And I am hoping that's the case. That would be a wonderful scenario. But if that is not the case, then what we would do is we would find, what scientists commonly call the hot spots of where there are problems. And that's how the state of Wisconsin creates those atrazine prohibition areas. So if there's one private well that comes up as a hot spot with over the health limit of atrazine in that well, then what the state of Wisconsin Department of Ag does is they test every single landowner's well within a square mile of that hot spot. Okay, and then if there's another well that pops up with atrazine from there, they go out another square mile. And that's how those atrazine prohibition areas are created. I view our role in this as right now where we have those areas of concern in our county, no one is doing anything about it. So what we need to do, and truly it's never really been a burden put on a single agency or entity. It's not Marathon County's job to enforce it. It's not necessarily the state of Wisconsin's job. It's kind of one of those fluid areas, and that makes me feel unsafe with how that currently is. And so we view finding those spots in the county, whether it be atrazine, whether it be nitrates, we view each of those situations and where we know there is an unsafe area to kind of diagnose what the source of it is. First of all, work on immediate education and outreach to those landowners so that there aren't homes with children, with babies that are drinking unclean water. We want to knock on the door the next day if we have to make sure that they get that word out there. And then when we have teams of people like health department folks, conservationists, we're able to look at what's happening on the land. Our department has a long list of everything that our agriculture partners are typically applying to the land. It's easy for us to see, connecting the land use to what's happening underground. And so it is going to be kind of a case-by-case basis at first, but first we need to create that baseline of saying, okay, we sampled 1,000 wells. We have 25 of them where there's not good information that we're seeing. Let's look at every single one and find out where we start, and have, we're kind of envisioning a little bit of a mini response team that's going to look at all of these hot spots and have a very methodical approach to how we'll deal with each situation. And that's doable with the amount of tests we're doing.
Thank you. Follow-up question. If they do find issues with wells long-term, and they decide that the well is no longer fit for use, what happens to that landowner when they need to, draw water? I live in a rural community. I represent a rural community. And there's going to be questions about what happens, when a well is condemned. Do I have to drill a new well? Do I have to go through the expense of, finding a water source and all that good stuff? Thank you.
So right now, Lori Miskimmon, CPZ Director. So right now, there are a couple different funding sources available for landowners who find out they need to repair or remediate their well in some form or fashion. The governor has made $10 million available immediately that we hope will still be available to our landowners over the next year to pursue repairs. There's also the USDA has a loan program as well. So I think when Kirsty speaks about that response team, if we have a landowner who gets a test back that points towards some sort of remediation or repair, we want to connect them to those resources to get that well repaired. So.
Supervisor Marash, please.
Thank you, Chair. Many members in the community are concerned with this mining project that's proposed for the east portion of Marathon County. So my question is about that. Are you going to be doing any special monitoring for that area, or is that the sole responsibility of Greenlight? Thank you.
So if a project comes forth from Greenlight, that project would be subject to its own monitoring, depending on what the activity is and depending on what the DNR puts in place for that project. But the groundwater plan will not be monitoring Greenlight or the metallic mining site. The landowners around the metallic mining site would have the option to try and be one of those 1,000 tests for getting their groundwater sampled as well if they wanted to get a baseline of what's going on around there. Their well water, I'm sorry. Yeah. So.
Supervisor Robinson.
I want to commend staff for bringing this proposal forward, and I had an opportunity to talk about them and raised a number of the questions relative to the quantity issue, and particularly on Western Marathon County. Abbotsford was talking about running a line from the city of Wausau. I know that in the Medford area, albeit in Taylor County, they have significant problems relative to finding the capacity for new wells. So it's a problem that we need to get ahead of in the county, and that's why you develop a groundwater plan. And the sampling is not comprehensive, but it rather is sampling for indicator parameters that will tell you whether or not you've got the potential to leach into the groundwater. The beauty of this plan is it gives them some flexibility to do some additional sampling should they find the needs. The DNR is Supervisor Opel collecting those samples in the rural areas, and I think that they're expanding that. If they find issues in the rural areas relative to PFAS, they can expand the sampling, and they can bring in EPA. And if you turn to or look to Oneida County, there's a town that was significantly elevated levels. That's more than likely associated with the land spreading of biosolids. And I think one of the things that they can do in the design of this place is this study is look at where land application of biosolids has occurred in the past and potentially tailor the investigation in those areas to deal with it. But Supervisor Marash, in regard to the mining, Former Corp Counsel Scott Corbett was very helpful in writing that, but there are a number of funds that were set up in that local mining ordinance, including a groundwater protection fund. So if there are impacts, there would be the ability to pay for that, in addition to the well compensation program that the state of Wisconsin runs. So there are opportunities to address the contamination, but many times people don't sample their wells. They sample them only when they do the property transaction, and that's not good for their health or their family's health. And this is a way for us to get a better understanding of where there are problem areas and work with those people to protect public health.
Okay, we got next Supervisor Seibert.
Thanks, Chairman Gibbs. The health department, I believe, is sampling all the restaurant wells and home sales. Aren't those wells tested and have to get a clean bill of health? And are those wells being tracked, or is it just you get a clean sheet and that's it?
Sure.
That's
Sorry, did I cut you off?
no, you're fine.
Okay. What you're referring to is the DNR, the program that we offer as agents through the DNR. It's a transient non-community well program. Basically, any rural, we've got the county campgrounds, restaurants, churches that serve water to the public. So it's considered a public well. We have about 75 of those, and we do sample those annually. So we do have that data. They are not as randomly distributed as we would like for a study like we're proposing. But we do have that data and track it for bacteria and nitrate only, though. So it's not the comprehensive testing that the Wheel Lab out of UWSP could offer.
Okay, thank you.
Sure. And second question, sales of homes. That data is brought in by the plumber who's contracted to collect the water and evaluate the well. There isn't much more information besides bacteria and nitrate that's known on that. So limited again.
Okay,
Thank you.
Next, we have Supervisor Krause.
Thank you, Chair. I was wondering, for farmers in the rural areas, if there is atrazine in their wells or whatever, and maybe they're applying it to their crops, what happens if you get pushback? If they say, well, you're going to ruin my business, my farm business, if I can't use this herbicide or these herbicides, what kind of actions can be taken if they do not want to reduce their use of these herbicides?
That's a good question. I don't know that I have a complete answer for you at this point, but I can give you a bit of good news. The good news is that there are herbicides available and very common in today's market that produce the same results as herbicides with atrazine in them. So look at it as different brands, non-atrazine brands, but going after the same goals of what herbicides try to do with killing weeds. So it's not as if, if I were to ask a farmer, please stop using an atrazine herbicide on this field, it's not as if that crop would be destined to fail. They would have a lower yield. It would economically impact them. They would just need to change what they're currently doing. So we know for sure there needs to be a huge educational push in that. I can't confirm whether or not we'd have any type of enforcement authority to force someone to stop doing that, as this is regulated by the Wisconsin Department of Agriculture and not by Marathon County. Those atrazine prohibition areas in which farmers are banned from applying that's not something that's backed by the Marathon County ordinance, where someone like Lori or I could issue a citation for not doing that. So it could be possible that the state of Wisconsin could pursue that through enforcement if it was brought forward to them by someone like our conservation department. I just don't know for certain what that would look like at this point, since this county has not done that yet. Does
Thank
that
you.
make sense? Mm-hmm.
Supervisor Sherfinsky.
Thank you, Chair Gibbs.
excuse me. First of all, I'd like to thank all of the staff and the team members who aren't here for a well-executed plan, and a lot of work went into it, and it shows. Very nice presentation as well. A couple questions that I have. One is, assuming, and I don't really see any doubt that we're going to support the plan that you've presented, once we get that data set kind of run through the mill, and I'm trying to avoid the word update, how will our data set then compare Marathon County to the surrounding counties within the central part of the state? Will we be about at the same place? Will we be a little bit ahead of the others? How will we compare in terms of our data set for looking forward?
I think I think the answer is we don't know, but we could try and give you some more information before Tuesday. I mean, we know the surrounding counties, many of them are doing some sort of testing, but you're asking like where would we compare in terms of
Exactly.
how current, how relevant, how current, how much data we have? Is that what you're asking? Okay.
Exactly.
Okay.
Yes.
Yeah, we could get you an answer to that. So.
Yeah, we won't know what the data is until we do it.
Try and
but,
give you some more perspective on that before Tuesday.
Thank you. And the other question that I have, relates to, I can see if I were a rural landowner that I might have a little bit of fear about stepping up and saying, sure, come test my well. And from the standpoint that if I don't know about it, I can kind of put it out of my mind and I'm going to ignore that. If I test it and you tell me I have a problem, now I have to deal with it. And the question that I have, obviously the first most obvious way of dealing with it is if you have enough land, you might try and drill another well. But the other one is if that's not open to you for whatever reason, are there any technologies, tools, processes that are available to the individual landowner for treatment of that water, short of drilling another well and hoping that you come up with a clean one at that point?
I think the short answer is yes. For something like nitrate, there's reverse osmosis that's commonly used. But we'd investigate the treatment options that would be available to that landowner and assist them in finding out what to do next, contractors, that sort of thing.
Okay, thank you. And maybe just share a thought here, because you're looking at voluntary cooperation. One of the things that might aid people in coming forward is if you give them a little bit of a roadmap or a picture of what might happen if they say yes and then they get the dreaded, by the way, you have a problem and now you have to fix it. You might, if you can give them a little sense of calm that that's not a catastrophe, that might help you get to yes.
Okay, we got next is Supervisor Wilhelm.
Thank you, Chairman. Thank you for bringing this to us. A question I have is Marathon County is made up of different soil types. Now, are there certain soils that tend to be more prone to having, is it sand, clay, how it drains, and how we could reach out to people that might be at higher risk in certain areas?
Let's talk soil. Woohoo, I love this question. Reed Brock Silt Loam is infamous for that in Marathon County. We see it all the time, and I even got an email from the DNR today about, pretty much weekly, I do get an email from the DNR about another polluted well. We do try to work with each landowner individually, so I'm keenly aware that we're dealing with this all over the county. But the first line of the email from the DNR, another Reed Brock Silt Loam. So it is highly susceptible. I love that your mind is going here, though, because this is one of the key factors we would like to use when we use GIS or geospatial data to try to locate targeted spots in the county where we know that it's going to be, the most highly susceptible areas. So we probably will do more testing in some of those areas than the areas where maybe we can do a few less, because we know there's been so few known problems and the soil type there is less prone to contamination. So, thank you.
Supervisor Drabeck.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Say, about a year and a half ago, we had a question on our wells, so we called the DNR, and they checked our address, and they says that we didn't have a well. And so we went to the well driller, and we told him, and he says, I never drilled a well at that address either. And then we found out later that they drilled the well, but it was 2 addresses back, that has been changed a couple times. So there might be some confusion with some people with that. I just wanted to say. But other than that, I'm all for the idea, and I think it really gives us a good snapshot of what the county would be like and what we can do to make it better. So, thank you.
Well, I hope you're still getting water now.
Yeah, we found a well finally.
Oh, perfect. Perfect. Supervisor Oberbeck.
Thank you, Chair. One question. Would there be opportunities for others to join the program such that this is an opportunity to get more testing done on their water, that they could, after the 1,000, or there are some economies in scale that we could offer to people who want to volunteer? And say if I was buying a home out in rural Marathon County or whatever, it's worth the investment of $250 to have that tested so that I can reassure my family is safe.
You're right, and it's even $150, not even $250, and that is for the homeowner's package, which is what we would like to use, testing for everything, the main things that we're looking at. So yes, there would be lots of opportunity for that. And there's been lots of exciting momentum that we're seeing come out of our county partners that are approaching these countywide studies as well. So we just heard the other day out of Rock County, when they did a big well testing campaign in their county, that the county funded, the original testing. And then after that, private citizens were 300% more likely, or they had, a 300% increase in private citizens. They had 300 more wells tested in Rock County, Little Rock County, which may as well be a 300% increase there. But anyway, the whole point is, this is a common theme in a lot of these counties, because I know a lot of times, especially when I'm visiting people out at country homes and stuff, you'll always find me asking, when's the last time you tested your well? Because, I lose sleep overnight, things like this, because I hear about this every week. And everyone says to me, I've never even thought about doing that. It's not, right now it's not on the forefront of a lot of people's minds. They don't know they should be doing it, that sort of thing. And so just getting the word out there alone will increase other folks wanting to get on board as well. But absolutely, we will provide resources and be ready to go when we have people that say, I wasn't selected for the study, but I'd like to get in on this as well. So we will offer to, take samples to the lab to make the connections for them to get them the bottles. And I hope that that's the case, that I hope we have a line outside of CPZ every morning of people interested in signing up to get their well tested because of this study.
Okay, any other questions? Go ahead, Dale, please.
I have to make a correction. Kirsty, you were right. It was a 300% increase in Rock County's nitrate sampling, so. Okay.
But it still could have been 300. 300% could have represented 300. Any other questions by the board? All right, thank you. Great presentation. Thank you.
Thank you.
We'll move on to item 9C4 from the Executive Committee. Item 9C4A, approval of the 2023 Administrator's Work Plan. Administrator Leonard, please.
Well, I was just putting the screen back to the agenda, but if anyone has any questions relative to the draft work plan, I tried to present it in a bit more of a succinct fashion than has been the practice with respect to, the work plan updates, so it actually it fits on a page and a half, as opposed to the numerous pages with all the information. But happy to answer any questions relative to the work plan itself. The resolution kind of walks through what the process has been, engaging the executive committee in terms of what are the true priorities. I tried to be a bit more realistic than in past years, just listing everything we were working on, and tried to indicate that if there were some items that really truly should be looked at for future years, as opposed to saying, hey, we'll try to do everything, to highlight what, at least from my perspective, were the priorities that the board has identified based on its discussion. But that was addressed at the executive committee. They made just some grammatical changes or grammar changes, but the document is before you for consideration. Your rules require an annual work plan to be approved by the board.
And I think the discussion that took place at the executive committee was there was a significant recognition of capacity within the county to accomplish. Last year we had 40-some projects on the administrator's work plan, and it was unrealistic. It was totally unrealistic. In discussing with some of my peer counties in some of the various counties, some of their administrators have 2 or 3 things on their work plan. And we have an administrator that's overambitious and has all of the things that the executive committee brings forward. But we tried to pare that back to have something that is actually accomplishable. Supervisor Marshall, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. In reviewing the plan, I noticed that 4B, evaluate healthcare insurance delivery methodology, that this past year we did talk about that at our, I believe it was our September meeting, and the consensus was that self-insurance was a better choice. However, with Workday implementation, it wasn't feasible to do. So I guess I'm questioning why it says evaluate when maybe it should say implement.
That's a great question. And how that would happen as a practical matter is we're going to put out bid, right? We're going to put it out to bid to see what price we get and engage the HR, Finance, and Property Committee on the next steps. I could foresee a world in which the bids come back and indicate that someone is trying to buy our business for a year or 2 years with respect to insurance, being fully insured, which is our current model, versus being self-insured. At the end of the day, that's a conversation we'll have. I hesitate to ever say we're going to absolutely do this without having the numbers to bring before you for the board to make an informed decision to direct staff to do something. But you're absolutely correct. Maintaining control of our healthcare costs is, quite honestly, it's been one of the things over the last 3 years that has kept us from being in a situation similar to a lot of other counties where they've had to make significant reductions to various service areas. We've worked very hard with our consultant to control those costs, but you're absolutely right.
Supervisor Krause, excuse me.
Thank you, Chair. I was wondering about, it says HRFC to develop a policy process relative to the divestment of county property. I was wondering if you could speak to what kinds of properties you're thinking of, because I know all along the county has purchased property and sold some. What are the plans for this coming year?
Sure, great question, and that's been on the HR, Finance, and Property Committee work plan for the last couple of years, with the understanding and knowing that we are going to have some significant properties. I mean, we have small parcels that we come to own. The county owns a great many small parcels that we're always trying to divest ourselves of. Kim's office has properties listed for anyone online. If you're looking to purchase property, please go to the clerk's office website. Feel free to offer a bid, and you can own a piece of property that has been taken by tax deed. But really, the issue we're talking about primarily is the next one we have to look at is social services. Our social services building on Thomas Street, we anticipate being able to transfer those staff based on the board's action several terms ago, and as well as this last term, funding projects to renovate space down at our Lakeview Drive campus adjacent to North Central Healthcare. Our staff are going to move there. So that building is going to be vacant, which is a very significant parcel, large building currently on that parcel. The HR Finance and Property Committee has given direction to administration to help them get information on that parcel's value. But really, the question is, how do you choose to divest something? There's the easy way, right? You simply list a piece of property without limitation as to what its use is going to be for the future. That's relatively easy. We can do that. Get some direction from HR Finance and Property to do that. And then you can go all the way to the more difficult side, which is engage the local municipality in terms of what, if any, future use plans do they have for that piece of property, work to develop a developer's agreement, or I should say a request for proposals for that property, to put some kind of guideposts relative to use. So it's really helping, and that's going to be a considerable amount of work. So from administration and staff's perspective, helping you as the policymakers figure out how you wish to go with respect to, first and foremost, that piece of property, but there are other significant pieces of property that the county owns that could be utilized differently. I hope that answers your question.
Any other questions? Any other questions? Supervisor Krause, please.
Yes, you mentioned the one property, and you mentioned property that's taken over because the taxes haven't been paid on them. Any other properties? I mean, I was thinking that there would be several.
Sure. There are. And the other part of the long-term plan for the Lakeview Drive campus, there are other departments that have some opportunities to be relocated. The Veterans Service Office, which is located on River Drive, our plan is to relocate them to the Lakeview Drive campus as well. We'll be bringing the other item on your work plan is bringing a plan forward for the potential relocation of other departments from River Drive. So if you think about our River Drive location, currently we have Conservation, Planning and Zoning, Parks, Rec and Forestry, Administration, UW Extension, and Veterans are located there. So we're looking at freeing up that piece of property. That is, as you know, with the development going on in the downtown area of Wausau, certainly a piece of property that the city of Wausau is very interested in. They've expressed that to, I know, various members of this board, and they've certainly made that clear to me. We need direction, staff need direction from the policymakers on what that potential divestment looks like. So that's another primary one. We also have opportunities where we really need to get some direction from the board on what the next steps are for property acquisition. You've received the West Side Master Plan presentation at your December meeting. One of the foundational decisions that was made by the Infrastructure Committee in terms of how to develop that plan was assuming the relocation of the Highway Department off of West Street. Well, we're going to bring information to you about what that would look like in terms of financial impact. I hope to have that completed in the relative near future. My hope is in Q1 of this year, present that to the board. That's a significant acquisition plan we would need to develop. So there's a lot of property related activities that are in this work plan, as has been the case over the last several years. I've characterized this to staff that in probably from 2018 to the present, the county has undertaken more significant renovation projects than it had in the previous 20 years. You've undertaken a lot. The project at North Central Healthcare and what that means for how you can essentially reduce your footprint in terms of the number of sites you own, it's significant. So that's why it's on the work plan. It's a considerable amount of work. Again, primarily working with the HR Finance and Property Committee.
Okay, any other questions on the work plan? If not, we're next on the agenda is the closed session. If somebody wishes to read out loud the motion. Supervisor Robinson, please.
I would move to go into closed session pursuant to section 19.85, parent 1, parent C and E and G for the purpose of conducting other specified public business, whether competitive or bargaining reasons require a closed session and for the purpose of conferring with legal counsel for the government body who is rendering oral or written advice concerning a strategy to be developed by the body with respect to litigation in which it is or likely to become involved, to wit, discussion and strategy regarding potential legal and contractual action relative to Marathon County Solid Waste Facility and purchase of landfill gas rights.
Roll call, is there a second? Okay, seconded by Supervisor Cavelli. Roll call is required. I'd ask the clerk to call the roll. We'll vote, we'll have a recorded vote. And Supervisor Seibert, please. Okay. And I would remind anybody that had joined the meeting via Zoom or WebEx, in this case, that our rules prohibit those individuals from having a closed session transmitted over WebEx, and so they will be put in the lobby and be readmitted after returning into open session. So those people will be placed in the lobby now, and then we'll wait till we have the public television also turned off. And then I would also ask that we no longer use the microphones, because that does carry outside. And so at this point, either turn them off or just not use them when asking any questions.